Just returned from the Ohio Speaker Design Show. It was hosted by Parts Express at their facility. They gave us a great little tour of the plant. Shout out to all the employees there. There was a really fun weekend. Lots of door prizes and discount stuff. I picked up a few little drivers here and some passive radiators at a really good price. One awesome door prize, this Hypex 3-channel amp that I will definitely have to investigate into a future project, active 3-way speakers maybe, and just really a great time overall and meeting some fantastic people. I did post a few pictures of some of the entries. I'm sorry to say I didn't get them all. A big shout out to Juan Machiavelli, I think is his name. Please correct me in the comments. But he had 2 entries. Both sounded fantastic, but his Norwegian Wood and the Open Unlimited was definitely the one of the show for me. Fantastic, using a digital amplifier and DSP, and just fantastic entry there. So congratulations to Juan on that speaker. Here is my entry, the OSB Towers, 3-way 4 speaker system. With a Morel MK1 tweeter, new old stock of Aerial Acoustics, a 5.5-inch mid-range, mid-woofer. I think it's made actually by SB Acoustics for Aerial Acoustics. And then 2 Dayton Audio subwoofers, 6.5-inch. I think they're DCS-165s. They're wired in series. I do have the cabinet compartmentalized. The top part is sealed totally, heavily damped to try and kill the back wave. And then bass section is tuned down to 34 hertz. I was shooting for 37, overcompensated a little bit, and so it dipped a little bit deeper. The port is a slot port. Out the back 1.25 inches, I think by 15 inches, is L-shaped. I did round the corner. I got a little 45 here and 45 here to try and maybe keep down some of the chuffing. But overall, I was pleased with the bass part of it. Using the dual binding post here kind of helped me with testing. I could hook up just the upper section and lower section separately and do some tweaking without having to open the box up as many times. I even had an issue where the phase was out with one of them, and all I had to do is take this off and switch some wires behind the faceplate and not have to dig out the whole crossover, because I did divide the crossover. I have the upper section part in one area and the bass in another one. But it was my best entry to date. Yes, there was a lot that I wish I knew how to fix, but I will go over some of that when I go over the specs and some of the measurements here. On the cabinet design, I was actually very pleased. I got several comments about it. From a distance, it almost has that bamboo flooring look. It probably less than 1/10 of the cost. This is one sheet of OSB for $29 for both speakers there, so pretty cheap on the materials cost there. It is tricky to work with. I will give you fair warning. I actually had to sand the pieces as I was working with them. I'd cut the rough cuts and then sand them down a little bit, sand the edges a little bit so they would meet more flush. Assembly was a little bit tricky because of the way I did the slot port and the overlap here. Glue up making this square was definitely on the tricky side. I like the look of it, but it was a little trickier in trying to keep everything square during the glue up. But from a distance, like I said, it holds up pretty well. It hides blemishes and problems. I could show you a dozen or two on each speaker, and it's hard to see from a distance at all. Even up close, you really can't see too many issues. I'd like to thank Toyd's DIY for a little hint in one of his videos about how to seal up some of the stuff there. On the inside, I did a 50 wood glue and water solution and sealed the entire inside of the box, and so it actually has no leaks at all that I could tell with the impedance sweep. Several braces in there, 3 braces across, and the port actually helps brace the bottom a little bit extra. But sealed it on the outside with Danish Oil, I think three coats there, and then spray lacquer, and it sealed up very nice. Sanded it down to about 220. I noticed that I didn't really want to go all the way. There's still voids in here and stuff, but the Danish Oil and the lacquer kind of seal things up, and it still has that rough texture. But I did round the edges, and it turned out pretty good. But good choice with some caveats to just be wary of splinters. This is some of my measurements of the OSB towers, and this is probably the one I'm most proud of. It's from DATS 3, the impedance and electrical phase measurement, and these are actually 2 speakers overlapped. The left and the right are actually overlapped, and I've never gotten 2 of my speakers to read this close together. As you can see, the overlap is very hard to tell the difference. There's a slight little variation in the peak of the woofers here, but overall matching extremely well, the best I've ever done. The phase is only out about 60-ish degrees in one area. The port tuning, the box tuning is down to 33 hertz. Again, a little lower than I planned, but overall, I didn't notice any kind of issues going that deep. But impedance maybe in that 5 to 6 ohm range across the board. But the other surprise, using that old chipboard, I was worried about having leaks and resonances and everything. But there's no bumps or hiccups in either speaker all the way across the full range there, which was impressive for me. Here's the overall frequency response in REW from 3 feet. I did a decent job of getting a relatively flat response here. The pinkish line is on axis, and then 15 degrees, 30 and 45 degrees off axis. But as I could tell before the contest, and I'm sure the judges' comments when they come in will point it out, I really didn't get the mid-range and tweeter at a nice level there. So I know it's a tone and timbre of getting the speakers to play in their best voice and best area, but it looks good on the frequency response, but it definitely didn't sound great. This is the first time when I was simulating, I actually took measurements of the raw driver actually in the cabinet and then inputted those into XM to get a more realistic modeling. I still tried to keep things a little on the simple side. You got a simple second order on the tweeter, of a second and a third order on the mid-range, and then a second order on the woofers, an L pad on the mid-range, which is more than I planned. Again, I was hoping to keep it about 1 or 2 decibels, and it ended up being 8. And then the tweeter, I think ended up being 6.5 decibels, but tried to keep it on the simple side as I could. This is my crossover points here. The driver's measured individually here. Here's the 2 woofers. I don't have a great way of doing a bass measuring because these are all indoor. My measurement system is tied to a desktop, so I don't have a way of going outside and getting really accurate measurements. So some of my room was probably in this, but I tried to mitigate it as much as possible. Had a natural dip here. This is that third order on the mid-range, and it's some pretty good. I didn't notice as much lacking in this area, but so I kind of left it there as a third order in mid-range, second on the woofers. The tweeter, I know these are shallow, and part of the problem here probably is with some cancellation from each driver. As I added parts to try and go third order and fourth order, things got a little bit worse, especially on the high end here. It started humping up. So I went with the lesser of all the evils that I knew, and still ended up with a crossover a little lower than what this tweeter likes here. I think it ended up being 1575 hertz, and the bass I think was 255. Here's an example of one of my earlier frustrations. When I measured the tweeter raw in the box, it's this red graph here, and I thought, well, surely I'll be able to kind of work that down a little bit very easily, um, even though it's playing pretty low here. I know the FS for it is 1,000 hertz, and so from what I understand, you double that and kind of roll it off at around 2,000. I think in here I tried a 2,000 hertz roll off, and it did flatten out things here, but it's still going pretty deep here, probably 1,200 hertz there. So when I tried to go a earlier crossover point, probably 3,000, I think is what the blue line is, it did roll it off a little sooner. But again, it lowered the amplitude here, and so I ended up having more problems than just leaving it crossing over too low. When I went to higher order filters, when I tried a third order and a fourth order, I noticed it would hump up again just before the crossover. You get a kind of a hump up in response. And so, again, with the limited knowledge I have and trying to keep it a low number of parts, I went with I think a second order crossing it, and it ended up pulling it down probably 3 dB down at 1,600 hertz, and so that's what I stayed with. To summarize, I kind of like to ask for your guys' help, and you can share in the comments or on any other feeds there that I feel like I did the best I could with the knowledge that I had, but what choices would you have done differently to get the mid-range in treble right in this, just going off of my measurements? I know probably the biggest issue was driver choice there. Once I committed to using these two subs as my bass section, it kind of lowered the crossover point. They kind of started having some issues once I got up about 300 hertz, and that pulled my mid-range down, which pulled my tweeter down, and so it kind of set in motion a series of lower crossovers that probably was quite problematic in the mid-range and treble area. But I appreciate any of your feedback. What circuits do you guys do to kind of do sharper roll-offs? I know third order, fourth order, sixth order are things, but how would you have handled it, or just flat out replace the drivers? I appreciate your input in the comments, and I hope to hear from you on many posts there. Future plans for me include an epic 7-inch subwoofer. I've got to try and get in some type of cool, stylish box. I've got a CSS 2 TDX center channel sitting over there in a box. I've got the grill and everything ready to go on it, but I've been kind of pushing all this stuff off. I just need to kind of get to it. But again, great experience meeting a lot of you folks here, and I hope to see you in the future.